Daniel, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight, share a little bit about all the great work you got going on. So I'd be love to hear about it, man. You were beginning to start to tell me about your life source plan, or what was it,
Yeah.
family life plan. That's a good
Well,
place to start.
man, I tell you what, I'm really glad to be here with you, and I love the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks.
And this type of work is close to my heart. 5 years ago, going on 6 years now, actually, I helped start the Family Life Shelter in Mount Vernon at our local church. And what you and I were just talking about was once people came in to the shelter. Maybe I could back up just a hair here
Sure.
and say this that we first opened up a homeless shelter, which I don't do that anymore. I'm no longer running the shelter.
Okay.
Spoiler alert. But when we opened up the shelter, we didn't have a lot of resources and things. We were kind of just responding with the best that we knew how once we came face to face with the issue, right,
Okay.
of homelessness. And once people got there, into the shelter, well, originally we were told to just have a warming shelter. We just wanted to be a warming shelter where people would come in, warm up, and then go,
Okay.
get out back into the cold. Well, once we realized that this issue is much deeper than
Yes.
just people needing to come in and get warm, but
Yeah.
this was a sociological issue that needed attention. So when we came face to face with it, we said we've got to do something about this. And this is a good intro to go into what we're talking about here, and that is, how could we choose to do something that we didn't have finances for,
Right.
that we didn't have the staff for, that we didn't have even honestly, the ability to do? And that there's a little kind of revelation that the Lord has given me,
Okay.
looking back on this. It's easy to look at something like homelessness, for example. And homelessness and addiction and mental illness, they're all very interwoven in our societies,
Sure.
all over the world, but specifically here in Southern Illinois. And we can look at, for example, people who are homeless, and we can say, well, that's a homeless person.
Right.
And when we identify them as a homeless person
Okay.
over and over again, when it's really hard to even begin to think about how can I help a homeless
Yeah.
person. And when we identify the problem
Okay.
before we identify the humanity, is all we see is the problem. So how can Daniel Nalley
Right.
affect homelessness,
Okay.
right? But the Lord began to really show me that this is not a homeless person,
Okay.
but this is a person who is homeless.
Absolutely.
And so as I began to identify their humanity first,
Okay.
not the issue,
Yes.
not the problem,
Yes.
but the humanity first, and then the issue. It wasn't how it no longer becomes, how can Daniel Nalley affect homelessness? It now becomes, how can Daniel Nalley not help this person?
Absolutely.
And so that takes us into, and we can go back and let you respond to maybe that or something. But so as we started to help people, we really quickly realized, I did, that people were not just going to fall into a success plan.
Okay.
And so I wrote something just really simple, really basic, called the Family Life Success Plan. And what I would tell people after we would do, a quick interview and stuff, and do their, induction, we would say to them, after we gave them the Family Life Success Plan, we would say, everyone who's going to have a success story is going to first have to have a success plan, because you're not just going to wake up one day and say, okay, this is a successful life. And so you have to first have a success plan.
Absolutely.
And so we began to kind of cultivate what that would look like, and we would give that to individuals, and then they would be kind of monitored and held accountable to their individual success plan.
Okay.
And I'm not here, still in representation of the shelter that's running, but these are issues that I have learned, firsthand, when it comes to tackling these big issues that seem like,
Yeah.
how can we tackle them?
Yeah.
Well, one, we have to identify people as people. and I believe that people are created in the image of God. So people
Absolutely.
are valuable, and their worth comes from their very being, not what they do or not what they don't do,
Right on.
but from their very being, their very state of being.
Mhm.
So people who are homeless, and then because we care about them, we want to give them, and this translates into all other social work, all other
Absolutely, it does.
ministry
It
work,
absolutely does. You're right.
and so
These are very transcendental concepts that you are talking about.
yeah, and so making sure that one, we identify the person, not just the issue, and then two, because we identify the person and they have worth, they have value, we want to be good stewards of how we help them.
Absolutely.
So in comes, for example, the success plan, and not just hopes and prayers or
Right.
well wishes
Yeah.
that someone's going to be successful.
Right.
And so
Which are always good, but they, and you never want to say that approach comes up short, because we know that it is effective.
Right.
It does, but there is a matter of walking things out and actually doing things. And oftentimes, I feel like, and I know that people have accused, especially Christians, of using that as a like a
Yeah.
escape clause. Well, we'll pray for them,
Yeah.
rather than actually doing something.
yeah, and that's the scripture speaks, not against prayer, but against, just using prayer as a cop out,
Yeah.
And John, it says, how can you see your neighbor in need, and you have this world's good, you have what it takes to help them, but you don't help them? He says, he doesn't even tell them, he just asks them the question and lets them and God work it out. He says, how can the love of God be in you? And that's a hard question that we got to take to God and let Him work out.
That's powerful, man. I mean, that's some convicting stuff, because, and that's where the rubber meets the road in a lot of our faith,
Yeah.
is that action sometimes, the taking the steps. We were very motivated by similar causes. When we got into this almost 3 years ago, a homeless gentleman passed away here in West Frankfort, and we felt like too. Well, one, like you talked about. If you look at the grand issue of homelessness, there really are no solutions to homelessness at scale.
Yeah.
I mean, even Jesus said himself that we will always have the poor amongst us. So in the grand scheme of things, but when you break it down to their humanity, when you see the person and the individual in front of you, now there is where we can create solutions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we cannot be so singularly focused that all we see is that one person. We have to plan and structure and organize for the larger scale problem. So it's an interesting like paradigm.
Right.
You have to see both the macro issue and the micro issue.
Yeah.
Because really, like you say, as individuals, there's not a lot we can do for the larger societal issue, which is why it's so important to form coalitions and collaborations, to work together in partnerships, to where you form a unified voice. I think that's one of the things that I love about where things are in Southern Illinois right now, is people are starting to come out of what we refer to as silos oftentimes, where people end up in their own little silo and bin, and that's all that they see and work towards, breaking out of those silos and beginning to work together in good collaborations. Yeah. I know you have done a lot of work in that area because you have worked on that regional level, at least. I know we were talking a little bit earlier about, on different levels, and you were talking about being, working on a national level and working on a state level and working on a regional level. Talk about what that's like, if you will, on a regional level in Southern Illinois, the different types of communities and the different types of like raw needs in the community. Not the stuff that you see on the highway driving by, but when you stop in those communities and you actually get out into those neighborhoods and talk to people.
Yeah. Well, let me go back real quick here and say this going into that. And that is, I don't know who originally said this, or I can't remember off the top of my head where this came from, but as I remember it, there's a story of a little boy who is down on the beach, and there's all these starfish, that have washed up to the beach.
Right.
And the little boy, and I might have it a little bit wrong, but the concept is the little boy was wanting to help the starfish, and he picked the starfish up and he put it back into the water, And someone that was with him was saying, "There's no point. There's no point in it. Why are you even messing with that starfish? Look, there's thousands laid out here on the beach. They're gonna, the sun's gonna hit them and they're gonna dry up and die." And the little boy's response was something like, "I can't help all of them,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that I can't help the one in front of me."
Exactly.
And I think that that's a concept that is really powerful because a lot of times. And I'm going to go into the regional level and stuff in the communities.
Take your time. You're right.
But
We got plenty of time.
So when you said the macro and the micro, they're both important,
Yes.
right? We can't get so caught up in the tiny details
Right.
that we forget about the larger picture.
Sure. Absolutely.
Let's just say within our region, we can't get so caught up that we're only dealing with, the addiction issue. But
Yes.
we realize that some people dealing with addiction are homeless.
Yeah.
Some of them don't have an education, and there's other domino effects, and there's other things surrounded that also need attention.
Yeah.
So we can't just get so caught up in the detail of what we're doing that we forget the bigger picture of things,
Yes.
right? So that's really important to kind of get out of your own echo chamber and your own silo, like you put it, we say bubble, But then the other thing is true too on the macro scale. Like it's good to have a good overarching understanding, kind of a holistic view
Yes.
of sociological issues, the kind of the spiritual issues and all kinds of things. The overview of different organizations that are out here in our region and different opportunities that are out there. You want to have that, but what can happen is sometimes when we're too general, when we just say, let me give you an example. We say, well, God wants to reach everyone.
Yeah.
I just believe that I'm to reach everybody, anyone. And that sounds really good. That sounds like, man, this person's not leaving anyone
it's
out.
hard to argue against. Yeah.
Right. But let's look at the fruit of someone's life who only talks in general terms. And chances are they're not going to have much fruit because they haven't zeroed in. They haven't identified things. And what happens when we only generalize things, we really do a disservice to the specific needs that are in front of us, right?
Yes.
And so we kind of have a little motto in our ministry whenever we're gathering around, and that is whoever's hurting most in the room is the most important.
Sure.
And it's not that they're more important by worth or value or, on that scale, but it's kind of like this. It's kind of like if you were to cut your hand off and you were to the emergency room and then I come in behind you with a broken finger, they're tending to you first,
Sure,
and so whoever's hurt worse is
Right.
getting the attention in the room. So we kind of had this motto of, whoever's bleeding out the most, whoever's hurt most, we want to give them the attention, because we can sit in there and say, well, hey, wait your turn. Everyone's important.
Yeah.
And while everyone is important, there are some things that take priority and there's some things that need specific attention.
Like triage.
Yeah.
Determining what's most immediate right there in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so important to be able to think flexibly like that.
Yeah.
Rather than just having, oh my gosh, this person right in front of me, in a room full of people screaming, but you see the person in front of you, well, they might just have, a knee, and to them it's a traumatic thing, but somebody over here might be experiencing something on a much grander scale. I think that one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about too is kind of in a similar way. We talk a lot about in the church about how Jesus, talked about leaving the 99 to tend to get the one.
Absolutely.
And that's a great thing, and
Right.
it's an amazing thing and an absolutely necessary thing. But we can never lose sight of that 99 have to be taken care of also.
Yeah.
And it's not that Jesus just forsook those 99. So we have to be able to, take care of that one individual, but how are we also taking care of everybody else? Because if we burn the whole thing down for one person, those 99 people don't get the assistance they need or the help they need.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's a good balance. And I kind of like using the word whole versus just balanced.
Yeah.
And let me throw this concept or idea at you.
Okay.
How I kind of came into this, I felt like I was really trying to be balanced. And there was a time in my life, my ministry, where I really, I just like, Lord, I want to be balanced. I want to have a little bit of all of it for it all to be good. But, what can happen is that there are actually times and seasons that we need to be specific,
Sure,
and
yeah, absolutely.
we need to press the button down on something
Mhm.
specific. But what happens when you're always trying to be balanced is you're always trying to have the exact weight on both sides.
Yeah.
Well, here's the concept. Sometimes we need to be able to say a certain truth, for example,
Yes.
without taking its opposite truth over here or the other side of it
Yeah.
to quickly come in and bring balance to it. Sometimes I just need to drop this truth nugget right here. And that truth nugget, the weight of it needs to be felt
Mhm.
so that it can accomplish its purpose, what the weight of it is designed to
Yes.
do. And whenever we're constantly trying to be balanced, we can spit off a lot of truth, but it never gets to marinate.
Right.
It never gets to have the effect of its weight felt because we so quickly try to balance it out. So
Yeah.
instead of trying to be balanced, I say I want to be whole.
Yeah.
And by being whole, that means okay, sometimes I have to be unbalanced.
Yeah.
And
I totally get the
Yeah.
idea of what you talk about with like being whole, and it is a totally different thing.
right.
So I remember, so I had a similar experience in my Christian walk too. When I got saved, come out of addiction through Teen Challenge,
Praise God.
was radically
Yeah.
saved, got and felt the calling of God on my life to go into ministry, went into ministry, and people think that I say it kind of jokingly, but I guess I do say it kind of tongue in cheek that I Jesus as hard as anybody could Jesus. It is the truth. And somebody explained to me that oftentimes, especially people with addictions, but I found that really a lot of people are just like that in general. We
Yeah.
swing from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
So I got big into the ministry, was doing great, and then I relapsed, and things swung hard back the other way to where it wasn't just like a little bit of social drinking or anything like that. It almost bordered on ruining my life again.
Yeah.
That extreme pendulum swing. And so after all that was going on, and I'm getting back right with God, and I'm like planning my future walk, I'm like, I don't want to go back to where I was. One of the big things that I realized was that in my rush to be so good, my zeal to be a good youth minister,
Mm-hmm.
I took my identity off the cross and started placing it
Wow.
on my identity as a youth minister.
Wow.
And then so as I'm trying to heal from all that stuff, I wanted balance in my life. I was like, I just want this pendulum to quit swinging.
Yeah.
I'm tired of my life going back and forth. But what it did in my life was I found complacency was what I found. And part of it was an intentional, conscious decision. I was like, I'm just going to sit over here on this pew and just warm this pew for a while and just chill. And God let me do it for about a decade. And, I got healed up a little bit and some things happened, but eventually you got to move out of that place of complacency. Like you talked about, everything is a season.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've seen in my life. Everything happens in seasons.
Yeah.
And it's great to be able to move into new seasons sometimes.
It is. And I think that we can learn from physics too. So, well, we can learn from physics a principle that we can see mentally, spiritually, emotionally, that whenever we're unbalanced, with a pendulum, whenever it's way up here, when you're way, way, way up here,
Mm-hmm.
Physics tells you that when you do let go of that thing, or whenever the rope breaks or it comes down, of course, the higher it is over here, the more unbalanced it is over here, the further over on the other side it's going to swing, right? And so I think that that's true a lot of times whenever we're dealing with things like when we get so off balance in this area, because too much of even a good thing can be a bad thing. And I like the quote that says the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we have to take those things into consideration.
Well, and that's such a transcending concept too, because something that I've talked about in the past is that life is a lot like a road. You have to choose which lane you drive, and you can't drive in the middle of the lane, get too far to either side though, and you end up in a ditch.
Yeah.
And then, but it's like that in a lot of different things. Whether it's our spiritual walk, whether it's our work life, or anything in our life, I got big into softball coaching, something that might seem, you spend a lot of time with your kids, and it was a really good, healthy thing for us. But I also saw those people that it wasn't a healthy thing.
Yeah.
And you talk about being holistic and looking at the whole picture. It is such a more all-encompassing thing than just balance. You think about balance, you think of like a a seesaw where you've just got
Mm-hmm.
two poles going
Yeah.
up and down like that. Where when you look at the whole picture, you're looking and you're taking in spirituality. You're taking in what's going on in people's physical life, what's
Yeah.
going on in their social lives, what's happened economically,
Yeah.
and one of the, you were talking earlier about how we have to avoid those broad generalizations.
Mm.
I think that's one of the biggest disservices that we do to people who are, I'm like you, I like to think of it as people experiencing these issues
Yeah.
rather than people, a drug addict or a homeless person,
Rather
you
than it
know.
becoming their identity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's somebody who's experiencing housing. I mean, there's all different ways you can
Yeah.
parse the words nowadays, but I like to think about that
Yeah.
too because it is somebody who this is just a small part of their life.
Yeah.
But you can take that small part out of their life, and if the rest of it doesn't heal up, then you've still got a lot of dysfunction going on. So you have to address the holistic issues. You can't even
Yeah.
just take out substance use out of somebody's life if you don't help address family issues, workforce
Absolutely.
issues, housing issues, all of these things.
Well, that's why we need each other. That's why one organization can't
Yeah, absolutely.
do it all. We have to have specialized people to go in there, just like our society works as a whole. You're not going to call a plumber and then turn around and call the same guy, to pull your tooth or to do heart
Yeah,
surgery, of
yeah.
course, and but when
Oh
you're
no, we're in West Frankfurt.
yeah. Well, I tell you, sometimes it seems like we have to wear a lot of hats, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, in some
you know,
communities we do.
yeah, and sometimes we got to be flexible and we have to wear different hats, but we still have to always realize that no matter if we're wearing 5, 6 different hats, we still have to realize that one, there's always people that we can learn from, and two,
Absolutely.
that we don't see the whole picture. I like when we talk about perspective. Perspective is literally is kind of like the idea of a vantage point. Someone can be up here at this angle at this level, and they can see from their vantage point something that I can't see. I might not be
Right.
at that level, or I might have something blocking me from seeing it.
Sure.
And so, and that's the same way when it comes to actually addressing some of the problems and the issues that we see, like in our region.
Yeah.
And to kind of answer the question before, I've been blessed to answer the call of God with Gospel Encounter to evangelize and share the gospel across, specifically here in Southern Illinois, the 34 counties
Mhm.
that make up Southern Illinois. And we've branched out and went, all over the country, but Southern Illinois is my heart.
Right.
This is the heartland, and I just I have a heart for here. And let me give you an example. Cairo, Illinois,
Mhm.
is a lot different than Vandalia,
Absolutely.
Illinois,
They are.
or Effingham.
Yeah.
Right now, there's still brokenness.
Yeah.
There's still cost of candy bars are going to be the same probably, in Southern Illinois, whatever town you go to. But it's a lot different, And when you go to Cairo, for example, and there's nowhere to get gas in town because of some sociological issues from a history of their past, of different things that have happened. That's led them to where they are now, and it's caused people to leave town, business people to walk away, and then so you have these fewer businesses in town, and now these fewer businesses don't have as much competition, so now they have a monopoly in some way, so they can raise prices, and they know that most people in this community have a link card, and so now people's link card goes just like that, instead of paying the average price for something, they're paying twice as much because it's at a convenience store, not a regular grocery store.
Right.
And then they have to drive out of town to Kentucky or to Missouri to get fuel. They go over the one of the rivers.
That's a real challenge right there.
That's a huge challenge. And so and then if you don't have a vehicle, if you don't have a vehicle to get around, you say, well, I can just stay here in town. But if you just stay there in town, you your gas situation is fixed, but where are you going to work at? When there's not options in your town for employment. And I believe at one time the household median, for example, of income was something around $12,000 for a household in Cairo.
Wow.
And then you go up to like Effingham, and and I don't know what that is off from memory.
It's a far different
but
scenario.
It's a way different scenario. But we have to have organizations and people. Just because every town or county doesn't have the exact same statistics, we still have to have all these organizations to handle and to minister and administer to the needs of everyone.
Absolutely.
And I don't buy when some people say, because I said that whoever's hurting the most in the room is the most important right now, right? But there's also another holistic idea, and that is that people have to, while people are hurting, they also have to realize that there are other people that hurt too.
Yes.
Like hurt people hurt people.
Yes, absolutely.
And sometimes when people are hurting, they can think that, well, this is all I know. I know that my pain is here. And so I'm not concerned, or I'm not aware, I'm not acknowledging someone else's pain.
Yeah.
Whether they could be in more pain than you or not.
Yeah.
There's so much introspection that it's actually unhealthy, because you can't see the other people around you. And so people will fight tooth and nail to just fix their own issue or this issue that they see.
Absolutely.
And instead of it being a holistic blessing of a domino effect to everything else, it becomes a competition and kind of a scratching and fighting tooth and nail for each different organization or different person, different issue to kind of get their own provision or get their own thing.
Absolutely.
And we can't do that.
Mindset.
We can't do that. We have to work together.
Absolutely.
So if it's Cairo, if it's Mount Vernon, if it's Carbondale, and for example, when you go to McLeansboro, Illinois, and you look at some of the issues and the things that are going on there, and then you go to Carbondale.
Yeah.
Vast difference. Carbondale, one of our biggest cities here. Yeah. McLeansboro, one of our smaller, for being the
Hamilton County's got one of the lowest populations in general too.
And McLeansboro's the county seat there. Yeah. And so you look at that, it's like, wow, that's a town of under 3,000 people. And you look at Carbondale with all the students and stuff, there's going to be a lot of different issues arise when you have that many students, young people in one place versus a place that is the rural of the rural, like McLeansboro. Mm-hmm. But each place has things that we need to be able to respond to on a regional level with different organizations. It's not like, one's more important than the other.
No, absolutely not.
And so,
and having that diversity in the organizations and programs. And that's where I think that we really get into a place in our region. Especially something we've been talking a lot about lately is the massive level of out-migration that we've had in Southern Illinois. Yeah. I was talking with a person the other day from one of our largest mental health and really homeless resource providers in our region. And they were telling me that they had a 300-person wait list right now.
Wow.
300 people. And you're out on a street with nothing, and you're waiting for 300 people because they just don't have the manpower. Yeah. It's not it's not that they don't have the programs or any of that, but they just don't have the staff. Yeah. Everybody's so short-staffed, especially in an area like that where there's all of the clinical requirements and stuff like that. Yeah. I know I've been working in this field now in Southern Illinois for right around 3 years, and I've seen a lot of social workers and clinicians move out of our area. Florida's going to have some really good mental health services here before much longer.
Are you sending them all down there?
Well, they're all going down there. I think they'll be back a little bit in a few years after being around people from Florida. They'll be back.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. That's funny.
But we really need to have those, like you talk about, the diversity of programs because while the needs are very similar and like the variety in those two communities, and Southern Illinois does, you have some like where like a Carbondale. Mm-hmm. So you have the Carbondale Carterville, Marion, and really it extends almost over to Harrisburg nowadays.
Yeah.
That really
To Murfreesboro.
yeah, Murfreesboro,
Carterville, all
yeah,
the way to
yeah.
Harrisburg, and then you.
And you got economic development through there,
Yeah.
and you got a little bit of prosperity, but then you get away from that. And I've heard people say, like I heard a police chief at a state launching a couple months back talk about how it was hard to convince politicians that people lived outside of that little corridor in Southern Illinois. You know, but there's a broad range of communities, like you talk about a Cairo and a McLeansboro, and I've been doing a lot of work down in Massac County and Metropolis.
Yeah.
And each one of these communities have their own little cultures, you know, that have its own little niche needs or, you know, approaches that have to be taken to where you can't do a blanket approach on everybody.
Yeah.
But all of the needs are kind of similar.
It's got to be contextualized.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great word.
That's a good word for it. And to me, like what contextualized means is we're taking, you know, truths. And for me, you know, I'm taking biblical truths. I'm taking spiritual truths. I'm taking mandates from Scripture to go into all these different areas. But in each of these areas, it has to be contextualized. And so that means that the same exact pattern that worked here might not work over here at this area.
Yeah.
So how you do an outreach and how you begin to minister, for me in our context in Carbondale is going to be a lot different than, you know, for example, how we minister at Wren Lake College whenever we're doing our ministry there.
Yeah.
For, you know, a community college versus a university. One has students who no one hardly lives on campus. Everyone drives from 4 to 5 different counties around and drives to there every day. And the other, you know, you've got the students all live within a couple miles of campus right there. They're readily available. So the approach is different. We have the same end goal, but how we get to that end goal can be different. And we have to be willing to contextualize whatever organization we're a part of or ministry we're a part of. We have to be willing to contextualize our approach, our methods, and our work if we want to be fruitful and yield the most and the best results. We just have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we try to do with our approach when we come into a community like here. We're here, so you find a community partner to work with, for one that gives you somebody already in that community that's established. So you've already bridged one gap already. So you're not right away completely strangers coming into town.
Right.
You know, but also so one of the things that's big with RCOs, like what we do, is what we call the participatory process, where we're constantly trying to get feedback from our community. What do you think you need?
Right.
You know, how are these services working for you? And it seems to be, from what I understand, a new I don't know if it's new, but a different approach, where in the past people have always told other people what they needed. You know, clinicians or, you know, social workers from these big massive schools with all these degrees and stuff come in and they tell you what your community needs to do to fix the issues.
Right.
Where we want to come in and we want to hear what you think the issues are to begin with, because it's easy for me, from my experiences, to look on your community and go, oh, you guys are dealing with this and that.
Yeah.
But if you are in that community and grown up there, you got a different type of experience.
Well, yeah, you know, and it is, for an example, you know, a teacher teaching a 6th grade class who, you know, grew up well, hit herself or himself, and they went to college and they're getting, you know, into their get out of their student teaching, getting into their teaching, and they have students that are coming, and they might be frustrated that this little boy is a little wild, or he can't pay attention, or he's tired, or he's hungry, and it's causing different things to happen that aren't acceptable in the class, like disrupting things. And what can happen is the teacher can begin to, you know, address the behavior, but if the root issue isn't ever dealt with, you're addressing the behavior with reward and consequence. And that reward and consequence, though, only goes so far when you keep dipping back into the pool every night. You're going to come back wet, right? Absolutely. And then you're going to get in trouble for being wet. Hey, you're going to get a reward for not being wet, or you're going to get a consequence for being wet. But every night you go back home and you're dipping in the pool.
Yeah.
And so if if you're ever going to grow out of that, you have to address the pool,
Yes.
right? The pool that's back there, that's at home, that you're dipping into.
Absolutely.
And I can't tell you how many times that when I was in school, I would see things like that happen. I would see kids that had a bad home life, and part of my story is I had a wild life growing up and stuff, and so I can relate to this, but kids would come to school and mom and dad will be screaming, fighting, yelling at each other. Dad will be drunk. He might be abusing mom, or mom might take the abuse from dad and not know how to handle it, and then pour it out on the kid. And or mom might be raising a kid all by herself and working crazy, and the kid's going with auntie and uncle and then cousin and staying with the neighbor and staying with grandma and then in the after school program, and the kid's bouncing around constantly. And there might not be anyone even educated in all the areas that they're going to even help them with their schoolwork.
Right. Exactly.
And then now the teacher is punishing them for acting up in class. And so there's just a lot more to really take into consideration whenever we are we're looking at the behaviors and the things that manifest that we just want to stop. We just don't do
Right.
that. That doesn't need to exist. Just stop doing it. But command only goes so far.
Yes.
We have to get to the root issues. And I believe that, a lot of these root issues are spiritual issues,
Sure.
of course, but spiritual issues still need to be addressed mentally. They still need to be addressed physically,
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I know one of the things that we talk about, or I talk about, I shouldn't say we, but we talk about that like with deliverance and stuff like that, is that, these things happen on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
But we live in a physical world, and
Yeah.
that while sometimes these things are instantaneous, more often than not, there's a working out that has to occur.
Yeah.
That the
I like
spirit, the overarching spiritual bondage can be broken,
Right.
but we have to walk that out in our life and make it part of our life. So that part might not always be instantaneous.
Yeah.
That's what we see in that's what we see in addiction recovery,
Yeah.
or homelessness recovery.
Well, I like to say, and see, I'm not going to say we because I'm not going to put this on anybody else, too.
I talk a lot of weeds a lot.
Yeah. So I like to say, hopefully other people will like it too.
Yeah.
But I like to say, you can't crucify a demon and you
Yeah.
can't cast out the flesh.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So demonic things and spiritual things have to be handled appropriately.
Yes.
And things of the flesh, things of the human nature have to be handled appropriately.
Absolutely.
And that's why, like in our life, in our ministry with Gospel Encounter, we believe in deliverance. We believe in the supernatural
Absolutely.
power of the Holy Spirit to be able to deliver people and set people free, even in a moment at times. But we believe in discipleship, and we believe that
Yes.
it's not an either or, but it's a both and.
Yes.
And we have to have discipleship, and we also have to have deliverance. Because if you say, well, this person just needs to try harder, but there's a spiritual bondage at
absolutely.
work in their life.
Yeah.
There's root spirits that they need that need to be, and you got to do this without demonizing people. We're not saying, oh, so and so is a demon or has a demon. We got to be careful how we do that. Some people have handled these things
not handled that very well.
very well
I
at
agree.
all. We never want to demonize a person.
Yeah.
We are creating the image of God,
Yes.
and when we come to Christ, when we profess faith in Christ, the Bible says that whoever believes in Him and calls on His name, He gives them the rights to become the children of God. And so, when a person has believed in Him and called on His name, they've been given the rights to become the children of God. And that's the beginning stage of probably the best holistic work that a community can have. Because when you really follow Christ, you're going the extra mile in your community, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
If
you
really are, yeah.
even your enemies in your community, people who don't think like you, don't look like you, don't talk like you, don't even want anything to do with you, don't vote like you.
Right.
You're
What?
still loving them. You're still blessing them. And you're still friendly to them. You're still, I mean, available to them.
Yeah,
I mean, so
that's
when
a strong
you
comment right there, being available
so
to somebody.
when you really build a life on the teachings of Jesus,
Mhm.
the community in the region is strengthened. But what's happened a lot of times is people have tagged Jesus's name on to their own kingdom that they're building, and then a
Tell it.
lot of other people are saying, "I don't want anything to do with that kingdom," you
Mhm.
know. And because I believe, like what the scripture says, that Jesus is the desire of the nations,
Yeah.
and that while we might, at Gospel Encounter, minister to someone who is homeless or who is an addict, or I might knock on the door of someone who is wealthy, who is a business owner, entrepreneur, or a doctor.
Right.
Or I might talk to someone who is uneducated, or I might be at a college campus and talk to a professor who, is like a scholar
Sure,
in their field, right?
Yeah.
But 10 out of 10 people are broken. 10 out of 10 people have been exposed to the brokenness in this world,
Yeah.
and 10 out of 10 people have been hurt. They've been affected by the mistakes of others, and they've all made mistakes. They've all sinned. And Jesus is the desire of everyone. So it doesn't matter who I minister to on the spectrum. I know confidently that Jesus is the desire of their heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so how I minister to people can be different. It can look different. You know, for example, ministering to a low income neighborhood, and you're ministering to an addict here, and they don't have a vehicle, they don't have a way to get to church services or a way to get to resources like yours.
Yeah.
If I'm going to choose to minister to them, I'm sharing the same gospel truth, I'm sharing the same biblical truth, the same love, but it's going to require maybe ride access for them. It's going to require
Absolutely.
more of my time, more of my talent to be able to come up with creative ways to help them, to get them to the place where God wants them to be and where they should be, right? To, now if I'm ministering to this other person who is wealthy or intellectual, we might not automatically assume that if you're intellectual, you're wealthy, or wealthy, you're intellectual. But for right now, we'll say wealthy and intellectual. How we minister to them might be a little different than how we're ministering to the other spectrum over here. But nevertheless, it's still important, right? And so that goes back to the holistic, I don't know if we say requirements, or the holistic needs that we all have, to one, look at each other and say, we have to meet each other where we are.
Absolutely.
And if each of us say, kind of have this idea that I'm coming to you, you don't have to come to me, right? Like kind of the Apostle Paul said, I become all things to all people so that I might win as many as possible. And so he realized that he was the one that carried the burden to build the bridge into someone else's life. And so can you imagine if I feel the burden to build a bridge into your life, and you feel a burden to build a bridge into my life, we're gonna have multiple streams, multiple routes to be able to get into each other's life.
Absolutely.
And be able to have a dialogue. But what I think is necessary also is that we can't just not build a bridge because the other person isn't. We have to initiate building a bridge, but it would go amazing if the other person would also build a bridge, back. So
absolutely it would. Like you talk about building those multiple routes is so important because everybody's needs are different. Everybody's route into whatever issue they have is different.
Yeah.
And like I say, we are all unique individuals and have different needs, different experiences, and the more pathways and routes that people have, the better off they are always going to be. Something you touched on earlier, we were talking about transcendiary concepts that go from one field to the other. Something that I picked up through all the diversity, equity, and inclusion classes I've been through the last couple of years is this idea of intersectionality. That as cultures or as people, we operate multiple social roles at the same time.
Right.
So when we take that and we apply it, take it out of the diversity, equity, and inclusion world and bring it over into, say, social work, we are able to look at people and see that, Not only are they whatever gender they are, whatever race they are, whatever cultural background, religion they bring, but they're also maybe somebody who whatever educational level they attain.
Yeah.
Most of my life, I only had a GED education. Um, you know, so they might have only a GED education or not even have a GED education. We've been able to work with several people over the last couple of years to help them get GEDs and stuff.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people out there that don't have that, and then they might also not have work skills, and just they're at the intersection of all these things: addiction, homelessness, incarceration,
Right.
and then at the root of a lot of it, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of domestic violence, and so all of these intersections occur. And until we can address and see all of those different intersections in a person, it's hard to really help somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. That's right. And I think, like, sometimes we can become overwhelmed with some people. Like, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Remember, there was a lady who was dropped off at our homeless shelter, and she came in, and literally it was like something you would see out of a movie. Like, how could this even happen like this? Like, a truck pulls up, the door opens up, pushes her out,
Oh, wow,
throws the bag out behind her, like kind of hits her while she's on the ground. He slams the door, drives off. She's your problem now. And girl comes in, is pregnant, is been on drugs. At the time, this person had a warrant out for their arrest, was facing different issues, and we had really wasn't even. It was like, man, are they even coherent enough to even begin a process of talking about a success plan,
Yeah.
And you look at a situation like that where every bridge in her life had been burned, parents, siblings, other people. No one wanted to help her anymore, right? And here she is getting out of this abusive situation, is thrown out in the parking lot, is left here, has drug paraphernalia on her, is pregnant. We find out later, she has a warrant for arrest, has nowhere else to go. You can look at a situation like that and say, and didn't have an ID, didn't have driver's license, it had no proof of identification. You can look at that and say, well, where do we even start? And it can be overwhelming. Like, this person's situation is just too overwhelming for me. Well, that goes back to that's why I need you, and that's why you need me, and that's why together you and I need all these other people who could be sitting right here at this table with us. Because we're dealing with a child now that's in her belly. We're dealing with a drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with abuse, a civic case here too now. We're dealing with not having identification, properly identifying someone. We're dealing with a lot of things here just in this one situation. But you know what? As simple as it is hey, won't you come in and get a shower?
Sure.
Won't you come in and get some food? Why don't we do this intake here in a few hours afterwards? Why don't we calm down?
Yeah.
And then after you get a shower, after you eat, how about you go talk to, and then let's find someone who can approach her, this person, the situation best that we have. How about after you do that, you and so-and-so sit over here and have a conversation, get to know each other.
Absolutely.
So that's a great place to start, right?
Absolutely.
So just because some things can seem overwhelming doesn't mean that we can't get started, because like it says, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah,
one bite at a time. The same way you eat a chicken leg, and so
now I'm gonna be hungry.
Yeah, man, woo. But that's the way it is, man. And
there's a lot of truth to that, like the power of a shower.
Yeah,
I mean, helping somebody get a shower, something to eat.
Yeah,
sit there for a few hours, catch their breath.
Yeah,
get some rest.
Listen to them, just listening to their story.
Yeah.
It's
amazing the difference.
Hear their side.
Yes. Hear them for the first time.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most frustrating things about working in this field. And everybody talks about it and acknowledges it, but not always finding the compassionate face, the compassionate hand when they go to go to look for services. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's really where a lot of our recovery
Ooh,
coaches come in, is being with somebody when they go to access those services, because they don't always encounter a warm face,
wow.
and then they're handed oftentimes an application that might be difficult to read. When you're in
Yes.
survival mode
Yeah.
your whole life to try to figure out what your social security number is, your address,
Yes.
you get embarrassed from the
Yeah.
get go. You don't even want to fill it out.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people out there not getting services because of those barriers like that. So, and it would seem like the people who get the education, the people who work in the organizations to fix those problems would be able to see it,
Mm.
but they don't see it because they're so wrapped up in what they're doing a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know, and
Ooh.
we see it a lot with the churches too. Our pastors in our churches are so busy churching and taking care of their church that they miss a lot of what the people are going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's that way across every field.
I think people get jaded, man,
Oh,
and I think that
absolutely.
people lose their compassion. I think that no one goes into an organization thinking, okay, 6, 10 years in, 20 years in, even, I'm going to lose my compassion. I'm going to lose my passion for
Yeah.
this. I'm gonna get jaded, and I'm going to kind of get a stony heart. But I've dealt with a lot of people behind desks and a lot of people running organizations
Mm-hmm.
and trying to help other people and trying to come up with solutions for things. And I'll walk away from some of those conversations thinking, man, like I'm probably nice. I might be the nicest person they've dealt with all week, and they treated me like this,
Yeah.
Or and not that I'm really intellectual, but man, I can comprehend some things, and if I'm having a hard time making sense of this
That's how I
and
feel
comprehending
sometimes.
this, and then I feel the way I feel after walking away from this,
Yeah.
well, how in the world is this person here? When I was, we were kind of caseworkers for the people we're helping,
Yeah.
and as their caseworker here to help out with it in this situation, how in the world are they supposed to feel if I can hardly navigate it, and not because it's unnavigatable,
Right.
but because the person on the other side of the desk or in the office or on the other end of the phone is jaded. And so I think that it's easy to just talk about them, but I think that, like, right here, right now, guys like you and
Yes.
we have to say, God, don't let us lose our compassion.
Yes.
God, don't let us become jaded to this. God, even though we get burned, even though we help someone and they don't appreciate it, or we bend over backwards and someone just doesn't follow through with their end of the deal. While it might help us to set better boundaries, while we might come up with, I don't know, maybe a different way of handling things that would be wiser,
Yeah.
that's okay. But we can't view everyone through the lens of past failures and past burns.
Absolutely
I mean, we've
not.
got to learn from those things, absolutely, right? But we like to say, like, when people come and we begin to minister to them, we would say things like, we don't care what your past is, we don't care what you've done all the way up till this point right now. Just know that we don't judge you, we love you, and you have a blank start right now. Now, as you come here, as you walk through these doors, from here on out, you'll be held accountable for what you do after this.
Yes.
But know that we're here for you, and if you're honest and if you're humble, we're gonna be able to work with that a lot more. And we got to remember that, because we can tell people that in year one, but then you get to year 6 and it's like, wait a minute, I've already been here, done that.
Yeah.
And now I'm tuning you out. Once I hear certain words, certain red flags, it's like, no, this is another one of these. And I'm not saying that we don't learn. I'm not saying that we don't know how to discern certain things. There's a fine line in people who hold power in an organization to discern something and just cast a judgment on someone.
Yes.
Because I can tell you, I'll be honest, I can be humble enough to admit this, that there are people who I thought, man, there's no way, I don't think that they're going to make it. They just don't look like they're going to make it. This just doesn't seem like it's going to happen because of this, and this,
Mhm.
and they'll prove me wrong,
Yeah.
and they'll rise to the occasion.
Sure.
And then there's other times where I'm thinking, man, look, this person looks like they're
Yeah.
sprouting up fast and they're doing well, and then I turn around and where are they? They're gone.
Yeah.
And so while we have to have discernment, yes, we got to be careful how we judge, and not lose
Absolutely.
our compassion.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that I talk with my staff a lot about is surrendering the results.
That's good. I
About
like
how
that.
all we can do is control our efforts, the part that we play beyond that. And we have people that engage in our services, and there's some that we've taken to treatment a few times, and
Yeah.
there's some that, we have to continually be there for them. And so many times we keep referring to the Bible, but what was it that Jesus told us to do with forgiving people? Was it 70 times 7?
Yeah.
So,
Continually.
but when we come to addiction, when we come to some of these issues like this, we're so quick to cut people off.
Yeah.
And people burn bridges, and it's understandable.
Right.
People can only take so much hurt, and
Yeah.
I get it. I was a horrible kid. I did a lot of terrible things to my
Right.
parents. So I totally get that you want to, but our Christianity compels us not to get like that,
Right.
to continue to forgive and give people chances. And research shows as people get older, as they deal with these issues for longer, eventually they do start to yield a little bit. I've talked to people in probation offices and courts that talk about people, an approach that they actually intentionally talk about doing is trying to burn people out in the system as fast as they can, because they have identified that eventually a lot of people do just burn out in the system, whether it's frequent encounters or whatnot, and they do eventually start taking the services, start calming down a little bit. But by that time, they're so buried underneath charges and fines and penalties that they'll never crawl out from underneath that.
Yeah.
So it's not an effective way. But what we see is that as we grow, as we mature, as we evolve, especially if people have support services, if people don't have to stay in that survival mode and they can slowly start putting one piece together, another piece together, and it might be when they're in their 40s and 50s. But so many people burn bridges, and then we have people in our community that cannot access services, can't access support, any of that stuff, because now they're excluded. Because they've got such a record against them, or they burned every bridge, but they're still in the community needing that help. And there has to be somebody to work with those people.
I mean, I can tell you, when I was driving here, I came down Veterans, and I seen a person, for example, on their bike riding it across the street that I know, who has used every service in our town multiple times, and there they are, still in the same situation. Yeah, I get it. And there's an important word, I think, as soon as I say it, it's a buzzword, it's a charge word. It'll immediately bring ideas and solutions and memories to our mind. And that's enabling.
Yeah.
Yes. As soon as I said it, your eyes lit up. It's like, yeah, we know. And we want to be able to give grace and resources that empower people and not enable them, right? And I think that
that's it exactly.
I think that sometimes whenever we give people all kinds of resources and there's no accountability for them, then it begins to enable them. And what I would say to people is,
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
So the difference between enabling people and empowering them is accountability.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's it. And what I would say to people is, if I ever start in our journey, me helping someone, if I tell them, I'll say, if I ever start wanting this for you more than you want it for yourself, I said, this will never work. It just won't. And at the moment that I want it for you more than you want it for you is the moment that I start to enable you.
Yes.
And I can't do that, because you have to have the desire within yourself to get help.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that we don't try to talk people into it. That doesn't mean that even when people are reluctant to do something, that we don't try to, hey, just come just to see, or we don't try to drag them along a little bit. I'm not saying that, right? We're not trying to be perfectly balanced. We're trying to be whole. There's been some times where we would go out and get people who were sleeping on the street and say, hey, we have a shelter here, you can come. We would go search for people, right?
Yeah.
And I remember an incident where this guy said, no, I don't do that. And I could just, okay, man, I respect that. Have a good night out here in 15-degree weather. But I was persistent, and I asked him, once or twice more. I said, man, I really, brother, I don't want you to freeze out here. I said, could we go get you some food or something, or at least, we don't want you to freeze out here. He ended up coming to the shelter. He ended up staying, and a few weeks went by. He was a transient, so he wasn't trying to stay in town. But ended up getting to the place where he needed to go, and got some help, and but it was because I was persistent.
Absolutely. You asked 2 or 3 times rather than just, all right, man.
Yeah. Yep.
That persistence is important with some people, because we deal with so much trauma. And so many people feel like they're supposed to be in that role because of their mistakes in the past and whatnot.
Well, people don't want to feel like they're your project too. Man, people aren't a project just to be fixed. Yeah. They're a person to be loved. They're a person.
Yeah, absolutely they are. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, I appreciate you joining me this evening. I feel bad that we really didn't get to talk about your regional efforts and some of your state and national efforts. Okay. Is there anything you've got coming up that you want to cover real quick before any events or to talk about anything you got going on?
Yeah, October 6th, we have a fundraiser coming up in Mount Vernon at the Gospel Encounter headquarters, 2901 Veterans Memorial Drive. And we were just given this building for the Gospel Encounter headquarters. And so we're really stepping out in faith here. We're stepping out in faith, and it's our desire to, awesome. Well, let me say our mission statement. Gospel Encounter's mission statement is to know Jesus and make Jesus known by being all things to all people. And that simply means that we want to know him first ourselves, personally.
Yeah.
Everyone in our organization, everyone, all of our volunteers, everyone, the number one goal is for them to know the Lord themselves. Number 2 is then to make him known, to share his love, his goodness, his mercy, his grace, his word with others. And how we do that is by meeting people where they are. So whether it's going to college campuses and ministering, whether it's out on the parks ministering, whether it's ministering at homeless shelters, or out on the streets, we want to go to where people are, fairs, carnivals, wherever people are gathered. That's where we want to go to take the gospel. And so we're going to be raising up people to do lifestyle evangelism and lifestyle missions, living life on missions. And so we're really excited. I'm excited to be here, be planted in Southern Illinois in Mount Vernon. And we're going to continue to do the regional outreaches. So we're going to continue to do evangelism training with churches and help resource churches and help individuals answer the question, how do I minister to people who are different than me?
Yes. Right?
Through hospitality and through acts of compassion and through kind of like services, kind of things we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And so, so we're excited though. October 6th, we're going to do a fundraiser. We're looking to raise monthly partners so that we can keep doing everything we do 100% free and volunteer ran.
Absolutely. So if somebody's interested in finding out about Gospel Encounter, how can they find you guys?
Man, gospelencounter.com.
Awesome.
Yep.
Just that easy,
It's that easy.
Well, Daniel, man, I really appreciate you stopping by, but even more than that, I appreciate the work that you do across our region. I mean, you really are, you really are much needed. You are a breath of fresh air. It's been really good to see you. Yeah. I sure appreciate you, man.
It's an honor to be here.